Welcome to the Kent Lapp Podcast.
Let me ask you this about Black Lives Matter. I was hearing Mark Cuban talk with Megyn Kelly on her new podcast the other day about BLM logo on the NBA court for maybe it was the finals or something. I didn't watch any of it. And she was giving him, she was positing to him that basically the NBA ratings are way down because of their political involvement and everything, and some of the players speaking out and team owners and some of those things. And he was arguing back that basically all TV ratings are down, which I think he has a fair point on that. And I also see what she's saying too, because I think it's maybe there's a lot of people that don't want it in their face every day, all day long. They just want to watch a basketball game or they just want to watch a football game. But he had an interesting he had an interesting take on BLM that quite honestly was surprising to me, and I think it's part of the reason why I'm having a hard time nailing down some specifics on BLM and the good, the bad, and the ugly. If the ugly exists, or if even the good exists. You know what I mean? His point to Megyn was they have on their court BLM, and it is for Black Lives Matter, capital letters, because I've also heard like people are against Black Lives Matter, capital letters, and they're all for Black Lives Matter, lowercase. You know what I mean? Like,
okay.
I haven't met anyone that came out and say they disagree that Black Lives Matter.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But I have seen, particularly on social media, some people that I would, I guess, probably agree a lot with that have some vehement disagreements with Black Lives Matter, capital letters, as an organization. I'm curious to know more what those reasons are, and I haven't found a lot of concrete things yet. And I think it's because partly what Cuban was saying, which is they're Black Lives Matter, capital letters, but not blacklivesmatter.com. So what's on the NBA court was not in support of blacklivesmatter.com. And he was even saying the two founders of blacklivesmatter.com basically believe things that neither he nor the NBA believe.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like there's these three different versions of BLM. You have blacklivesmatter.com. You have Black Lives Matter as a movement, which I think he was also saying. Now, is he saying they were for the movement but against the .com?
Probably.
I think that's sort of what he was saying. It was more confused than I thought it would be coming from Mark Cuban.
Interesting.
So what?
Well, that's a whole other podcast episode, but I think, there's probably more than three different kind of distinctions. I would say there's probably a lot more than that. And I think it's a long overdue conversation that we're having about racial equity. And I think it's one that's really difficult to have because of the, lack of, there's a very narrow band of acceptable speech around it, culturally acceptable speech. And so it becomes difficult to talk our way through it. It's important that we do, and I'd love to do that sometime, because I think some of the same, it's an important conversation to have. We need to talk about the ways in which our society is not equitable, and that there isn't this kind of level playing field across the board for people of different races. And we can even talk about how much we focus on race versus other, ways to class people, right? We could talk about all that, but one of the stats that is telling about, you might look at America, and I look at America and think that outside of the government, I would say tremendous progress. We've had a black even in government, we've had a black president. We have, black leaders of companies. Now, you might argue that they don't have it all, maybe the dominance hierarchy there still has racist elements to it. It probably does, but it's been remarkably reduced, and so let's cheer that progress and look for ways and root out any kind of racism and hatred that we find in any of those, in our own hearts, in our own families, and in the structures that we inhabit as a community, in our communities, and all of that. So yes, that's a long overdue conversation. We need to have the conversation. We're in an environment where it's very tough to have the conversation because there's really only one, like there's the kind of one of the consequences of the left's assault on free speech is that there's consequences for saying certain things, and so a conversation requires two or more parties talking, and if there's only one acceptable viewpoint, you're not going to have a conversation. So I'm a little worried about that for the stability of our communities. We have to be able to have the conversations, right? And to do that, you have to have the freedom to do it. And so I think it is interesting to watch people in a place of influence try to navigate that whole thing of going, yeah, there are, we have to have the conversation. There are parts of our society that are still bent in some way that can be made better, and we should work to make them better. There's so many narratives that just go unchallenged that are accepted as true, and that's a whole other, like Sam Harris does a great job of breaking that down specifically about police violence and stuff like that, which I don't have time to talk about, but it's an important conversation. It's a really challenging conversation because there appears to be only really one viewpoint that's acceptable without getting shouted down and labeled and canceled. And then, there's also elements of the Black Lives Matter political arm that are truly Marxist, right? And, well, you only have to go back and look at the 20th century to look at the body count of Marxism as an idea. It's easy to point to at least 100 million graves, and lay it at the feet of Marx as a way of thinking, right? And so we should also, in addition to doing the work on racial equity and having those tough conversations and going through our society and looking for opportunities to make that better, we also need to be able to be free to talk about, ways to make our societies better by rooting out corrupt, I would say, in my opinion, technically satanic ideas that Marx espoused, right? And so I think we need to look and have that conversation, but it's almost impossible right now in the current moment that we're in to decouple that and have the conversation about Marxism and the conversation about racism without the two just going, like, it's a really difficult time we're in.
I do agree with that. I also feel like we're trending in the right direction to have some of those discussions. I feel like, spring and summer, it was impossible. And we'll wrap it up for you. Let's get you out of here. But I feel like there's some level of rationality that is starting to creep back in. Maybe that wasn't quite here in June and July.
You think that's going to come about more as a result of us being on the other side of the election soon?
Yeah, that's probably that may be the case. Probably. I mean, I think in general things will simmer down. All right, we'll get you out of here. You're out of time. Anything else on Q, or did we cover it for now?
Well, yeah, my comment that I would just invite people who are worried about Q and fearful about Q, or fearful about the things that Q has brought their attention to. Let me say it that way. If you're fearful, I want to invite you to look to Jesus. I want to invite you to actually allow the kingdom of love to flood out that fear and replace it with the fruit of the Spirit, which is, peace, love, joy, etc. So it's like, I'm not judging and saying that one person is or is not experiencing that peace. I would say, if you look at yourself and you say, I have some anxiety, I have some fear. Okay, that's okay. Like, just, you can confess that, and you can you can allow your mind to be healed and transformed in the love of Jesus, right? And so I would say, let's focus there and find ways that we can start at home and make our communities more loving, more equitable, more honest, more, all of that. And in doing so, we'll be the kind of people and will raise the kind of kids who will hold their leaders to account and who will vote for the kind of people in the future who are a reflection of that kind of mindset rather than what we have right now, which is a reflection of the current mindset.
Yeah.
So we solve these problems. We start internally, right? And so, like, I get it. Q is very compelling. It's very tempting to try to explain all the problems of the world through a single lens and have a single point of resolution to that tension you're feeling. And that's the simple re-election of Donald Trump so that he can do his job to fight evil and eliminate these, people. It's like, I can see why that's a tempting view, and it falls short.
So do your research. Just do a little bit more of it on the kingdom of God and what the Bible has to say about that.
I'd love to invite people to do that.
Yeah. Patrick Miller, thanks for being on, man. Appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Let me get a picture of you real quick. Keep your
buddy.
Keep your headphones on.